Mediatel for inviting me along today. Oops, where are we? Okay, the brief was to say a few words about how the BBC is using data, technology and insights to better serve BBC audiences. And I've got 15 minutes. I think that's a bit of a challenge, but what I'm going to try to do is outline some of the building blocks that we are putting in place to enable us to do that, and then to talk a little bit and to give you a few examples of how we are using new technologies to engage with new audiences, less well-served audiences in new ways, and to talk about some of the opportunities that are emerging, some of the changing business practices in terms of what we think about in distribution of content to meet changing expectations. And also, from my point of view as the Director of Audiences, I'm responsible for the analysis and measurement and so on, some of the opportunities emerging for us. Just to give you a bit of background, as many of you will know, the BBC is a public service broadcaster. Our mission is to inform, educate and entertain. And whilst this is a conference about television, we do that across a number of different media, and we always need to bear in mind that our television audience is our radio audience, is our digital audience, and think about the entire portfolio when we think about how best to meet our mission and our public purposes. Right now, we're doing quite well, I think, in terms of our overall reach. We're engaging with nearly all the UK population on a weekly basis. But we know that in the next charter period, we are going to need to make some difficult choices in terms of our investments. And we know that patterns and expectations are changing, particularly among younger audiences. And this is reflected in our new aim, if you like, to reinvent the BBC for a new generation in an environment where there is much greater challenge, much greater competition, but also where we mustn't take our eye off the fact that we still deliver the great majority of the value that we deliver to all audiences through our traditional linear broadcast channels. So, as Tony Hall often talks about, our Director General, we have to keep riding two horses to ensure that we are future-facing while maintaining many of the services today. And meanwhile, there is growing competition for our audience's time and their engagement, and our competitors are setting real sort of different expectations over what audiences are looking for in terms of more personal, more direct customer relationships and experiences. And digital behaviours that were once limited to perhaps emergent groups among younger audiences are now really becoming the new normal. Watching online TV, finding my news on Facebook, and personalised experiences becoming very much expected. So to address this, we are investing in a new programme of personalisation, and many of you who live in the UK and use iPlayer may well have seen what we're calling the dismissables at the moment, encouraging you to sign in and warning you that indeed you will soon need to sign in if you want to enjoy BBC audio and video content through iPlayer and iPlayer Radio. So we've made a strategic investment in the My BBC programme. So far, we've built a single scalable ID system that supports the whole of our product portfolio. We've got the back end built, if you like, the user activity services so that we can see what is happening. And this is now starting to enable my data insights team to be able to extract new insight about our signed in audience. By doing that, that then helps us understand people's interests, appetites, their enthusiasm, and that's where we're then able to start to target our content to those people with recommendations and personalisation of content that then helps them get more from the BBC and we hope increases the value that they gain from us as an organisation. And meanwhile, we are also building up a more comprehensive understanding of the audience across all platforms. So we're just embarking on an overhaul of our understanding of the audience across media, with the development of a new panel that runs alongside the industry currencies and is indeed calibrated to them, but also allows us to understand the overlaps between different media and understand and contextualize all that signed-in data, put that into the context of the broadcast consumption, and that will also help us develop better products for us to recommend to audiences. And part of that is very much towards also developing data partnerships to work collaboratively with other data providers in order that we can better serve audiences through better understanding of them, both on BBC and indeed on other platforms. So that, if you like, are the building blocks of what we are currently doing. And building on these foundations, what I want to do now is just talk about some of the ways that we are shaping our offer, I think, to better serve our audiences. So I'll touch on some of these. This is a bit of a whistle-stop tour, and happy to take questions at the end. What we've learnt and what we've observed from the behaviour is that we think of the audience in a number of different ways, and there is certainly a continuation of what we would call residual behaviour, where the media choices are oriented around, for example, the linear viewing schedule. People turn to those channels when they are airing, and viewing decisions are made largely driven by the EPG, the Radio Times, and also perhaps sort of word of mouth and so on. But that's the kind of the classic TV model, and that really still holds good for a large part of the audience. At the other end of the scale, and these people do tend to be younger, but as I say, these younger behaviours are very much creeping up into the older generations. We see on-demand being much more prevalent. The choice when people turn on the TV is to look to on-demand more often first than the linear schedule, driven by what is being talked about, driven by recommendations, and also an expectation to really be able to discover and consume content anywhere. So with this in mind, that influences our thinking around our marketing, our windowing and distribution strategies. So meeting these emerging demands, we start to see new non-linear strategies, box settings, single drops for series, and so on. Audiences want the flexibility to choose when to watch, and box sets are fast becoming a new normal for those audiences that use SVOD services. What we've seen is that having all episodes available in a single drop does encourage people to watch more episodes, get more engaged, and more passionate about the content that they're watching. And it also does improve the perceptions of the VOD service, in our case, the iPlayer. So Peter Kay's Car Share, which was an interesting experiment in its first series, where we dropped half the series, or the full series at the beginning, prior to the first episode, and that generated a lot of word of mouth, and it had no cannibalizing impact on the television. Same sort of thing this time, and Peter Kay's the Car Share has been one of the top 10 programmes on BBC this year, one of the biggest comedies we've had over the last few years. drama, where that's often an on-demand choice, much greater proportion of the audience watches on demand as a genre, that's also proven to be extremely successful. Taboo is a really interesting example here. I don't know how many of you tuned into it. It was broadcast on a Saturday night. Not perhaps the time of choice for some audiences that really loved it. So we found really very early on in the series a very high iPlayer use. But that iPlayer use continued to build as word of mouth was very strong, and people were coming to that series long after the first episode and then catching up. And that delivered, I think it's one of the top dramas on iPlayer ever. And that ability to be able to catch up on that series and effectively make that available for an extended window was a big part of Taboo's success. What we're also doing is ensuring that we're reaching, again, a kind of the emergent audience where they're looking at new ways of consuming content. I won't go into a lot of detail here, but promoting content, be it on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, has proven to be highly successful in this new social strategy that we have, which is to promote, engage, extend, and distribute. So highlighting what is available and driving people back to iPlayer has proven to be successful. We're also engaging audiences with content that extends beyond the linear content, the television content. Around the new year, there was an alternative ending for EastEnders for our Snapchat users. I must say, I was trying to find this on Snapchat, and I did struggle, and I really did feel my age at that time. And then we've also got a really interesting element of this, which is extending beyond broadcast. I don't know how many of you watch the New Year's fireworks, but you would have been able, if you'd chosen, to watch on Facebook, where you could see them live with a 360 video. So you could look around, you could see the crowd, you could see everything going on. It kind of put you in the moment. And that has been very successful beyond that, and after the event, making that available and again cross-promoting that drove millions of users. And finally, another good example of how we can distribute content. There was a very powerful documentary about Rio Ferdinand and his loss, Rio Ferdinand being mum and dad. And that was very successful. We drove a lot of people to the content through social promotion of that, but we also repurposed a lot of that material and then again promoted it, and it was something like 28 million views of the various different clips that we had there. So again, lots of different options for distribution to reach these new audiences. I won't go into too much more detail because I'm conscious of time, but emails, not exactly the most cutting edge of technologies, but again, with an understanding of the individual, you've signed in, we know what you enjoy watching, we can start to tailor our marketing towards you, and this has proven to be really successful. An average kind of click-through rate of an open rate of about 55%, which is very strong, and when it's particularly well targeted, the click-through rate to the content is much higher than we would have expected. What else is data and technology allowing us to do? We're able to look at audiences in real time. So the day after the presidential election, we were able to look at audiences that we felt would enjoy or would find value in BBC News content, and we were able to target younger audiences who had an interest in news, who hadn't signed into the news app, and we were able to drive new audiences to some of the stories there. Personalisation I've talked about already. With the new personalisation in iPlayer, where we're asking you to sign in with your age, your gender, and also your postcode, we can start to target content to you, both in terms of your segment, if you like, your profile, where you live. This is an example which is targeted at Scottish audiences. And this sort of initiative has proven to be very successful. But then beyond that, we've then got the algorithmic recommendations driven by your behaviour. But of course, primarily, we're all about editorial curation. So there's still a very strong editorial curatory role to play alongside these machine-driven recommendations. And then there are just the sort of the benefits of the new technology, being able to pause and resume and so on and so on. So I won't go into them. What does it mean for our team? We're starting to see real insight, which is really exciting. These are fairly abstract, but the one on the left is around sports. We can now see people who are interested in football. What other sports are they interested in? A great majority, not quite the majority, but a lot of people who come to BBC Sport are football fans. And actually football is probably really the only sport that they enjoy. Whereas when we look at other sports, it's quite interesting to see that fans of some sports are also very big fans of other sports. And so we can start to think about cross-promotion from sport to sport and also driving people across the portfolio, which by engaging people across more than one product, we strengthen the relationship that we have with them. This is a sort of network graph in the middle. This is about the relationship that people have between products, and we can look at how people move from product to product. And this breadth of relationship is one of the things that we know is a key driver of support for the BBC. So understanding how we can push people and encourage people to find out more about different topics across the portfolio strengthens the relationship, enables people to get more from the BBC, and is also quite revolutionary in the way that we actually work internally, where we have to start really work across silos. So we have to encourage people, the news team, to push people to sport, and sport to push people to other parts of the BBC, which is a kind of new way of thinking for the digital products themselves. And finally, we're making much more of this information available, either in real time, which is influencing editorial decisions in the newsroom, or in dashboards, which is ensuring that the business is more audience informed in its decision-making processes. Okay, as I say, a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but let me just wrap up. Where next? I think that for us, there are some really interesting opportunities emerging here, and it's raising some important questions about the relationship that we have with audiences. What is the role of public service media in a digital environment? What benefits can we clearly articulate to our audience to ensure that they gain value from us, to ensure that we maintain our the strong bond of trust that we have with audiences, but also to empower them, to help them, and to reshape what public service media in the 21st century can be. And that, I think, is through enabling our audience to take ownership of the data that organisations collect around them. And obviously portability is going to be important with GDPR, but we want to enable audiences and educate audiences in that respect, but also forge data partnerships with third parties to better empower audiences in that regard. But we also need to be conscious of keeping and think about delivering core, entertaining, informative content. And so our team is also looking at the future of the BBC. Where does the business need to go next? And we're very excited by some of the work that we did, which was looking at what new opportunities were there for the BBC. And we see virtual reality and augmented reality as being a really interesting area. We're experimenting in that space. But for us, it really can meet some of the public purposes that we can deliver. It can be very immersive. It can really change hearts and minds with the right content. And so we're very pleased to see that the BBC is now starting to make much more serious investments in these new technologies. So I think that's another exciting path for us for the future. That's it. Thank you very much. Hello, John. How are you?
Can you hear me? Oh, people can hear me now. Superb. Nick's going to be on the panel, so we could have some questions for you later. I might see if there's one burning question in the audience in one moment. First up, I just wanted to ask you, you covered so many things there. I mean, promotion, scheduling, discovery, engagement. In fact, you made my life difficult as a chair because I don't have anywhere near as many subjects on the agenda I was going to talk through. I'm going to ask a really tough question in return then. If you were a commercial broadcaster, what do you think the greatest opportunity would be for using data and insights at a commercial broadcaster?
Yes, that is a difficult question. I think. I mean, I can only answer it from my bias within the organisation. So I think being able to understand your audience better. So going back to what John was able to share with us about how you can link your media consumption to your product consumption, ownership, to better understand people. And therefore, if you're an advertiser-supported broadcaster, then you would think that that would facilitate more revenues. So, Channel 4, for example, has sort of turned its data team into a profit centre, if I understand that right. Yes. So I mean that's really exciting, where you can take this data and you can say, we can actually help the business drive revenue through this. That's got to be the core of it for a commercial broadcast, hasn't it?
I love that answer, because that makes my job a bit more meaningful.
Good.
So good one. Any burning questions from the audience? Or okay, we've got one here. Andrew, can you wait for the microphone?
Andrew Bonner from Discovery. I just wanted to ask, when you moved BBC Three from television to online, what was the biggest learning in terms of audience measurement?
So when you moved BBC Three to online, what was the biggest learning from an audience measurement point of view?
Well, it certainly presented. It was one of the first kind of big challenges that we had in terms of measuring brand reach and determining what metrics were most important for us. So from our point of view, what we recognised was that to understand the level of engagement with content was if you like, a kind of a new metric that we didn't really value that much before. And so, but also, BBC Three manifests itself all over the place, and it challenges lots of the definitions of what is television, for example. So, all its new content is broadcast on either BBC One or Two. So BBC Three is a broadcast entity in some respects. So, what is its reach? You need to be able to measure its broadcast reach with its online reach, and plus its social distribution as well, be it on Instagram or wherever it might be. And so building up the picture of reach and time spent with BBC Three and audience engagement was one of the biggest challenges for the team. I think one of the opportunities that it presented us with was that it brought a digital mindset into what is now called content, the television team. And that was actually transformational for the way that they think about content distribution and production. So in those respects, it was a very positive thing.